Best day of the week. Sure is. This is the Friday edition of the Morning Pit. You know what we always do on Friday morning pits. We always look forward to it. We're always excited about it. And certainly this week is no exception. It's the mailbag edition of the Morning Pit here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We take questions from Pitt fans throughout the week on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. And then we answer as many as we can here on the Friday edition of the Morning Pit. I like it a lot because it's kind of takes, I don't want to say the pressure off, but it's a little bit less work for me. I don't have to come up with topics and things to talk about. And you guys get to sort of decide what we're going to talk about. You get to decide what the topics are and where the discussion goes. So I always look forward to this. For that reason, I also look forward to it because you guys usually come up with good things to talk about. And you have good questions to ask. So I'm always excited about doing these episodes here on the Friday edition of the Morning Pit. So we got a lot of great questions this week. We had a couple to wrap up from last week and some really great new questions this week. Let's jump into it here on the Friday edition of the Morning Pit. The Morning Pit Mailbag on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, Fridays are always the fun day. It's the end of the week, TGIF and all of that, and you get the Morning Pit Mailbag here to get your day started. So I always look forward to these, and hopefully you do as well. I think they're fun. I know we jumped around to a bunch of different topics yesterday, but we're going to do the same thing again today, except this time it's not me deciding which topics we jump around to. It's you. And so I like that. Hopefully you do as well. And let's jump into it. Of course, little housekeeping, what we always ask you to do, like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, so you don't miss any of our Pit video content. We had our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30. We did that on Wednesday. That was a lot of fun with Jim Hammett and me. And a lot of comments and questions from you guys. Plus, we have our post-game show. We'll be live tomorrow to recap Pitt Cincinnati. It's not going to be right after the game ends. It'll probably be a little bit later, probably 7 or 8 o'clock. We'll post an exact time when it gets closer. But we'll have that to look forward to. And you want to make sure you don't miss any of it. Subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Subscribe button's right down there. So click that thing, turn on your notifications, and you will get an alert every time we go live or we post new content. The Pat Narduzzi press conferences, post-game shows, live show on Wednesday nights, anything in these Morning Pit videos, it's all right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And you won't miss any of it if you subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And then, of course, check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com for the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com and message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of your closest Pitt fan friends. Let's jump into a couple questions. Start off with a couple that were left over from last week. W. Florigen says, just out of curiosity, I took a look to see where some of the transfers who were starters on Pitt's defense last year ended up on the first weeks too deep for their current teams. I could be wrong, as I'm not sure how accurate my information is, but it seemed only 2 of the defensive players who left are listed as starters on their current team. If this is the case, it makes me feel somewhat confident in our defense, and maybe the players we lost weren't a major loss. Do you feel that this defense could be better than last year's defense on merit alone, not just because the offense should be better, as that would benefit the defense as well? So we haven't really talked about the transfers who left. There were, obviously there was about 15 guys who left and went to FBS or FCS teams, and we actually did a recap on Panther-Lair.com a couple days ago, just kind of breaking down how all of those guys did. And to your point about starters, Sam Okunlola and Deion Hayes both started in the Colorado game against who they played, North Dakota State. Stephon Hall started for Youngstown State. As far as defensive guys, and Aiden Henningham started at Albany State. So in terms of FBS, Okunlola and Hayes were the only defensive transfers who started their FBS games. Offensively, I don't know if Carter Johnson got the start, but he's played well. He's played 2 games for Florida A&M. He's got 6 catches for 78 yards and a touchdown. He's the 3rd leading receiver for his team, so he's playing pretty well. Byron Floyd, the long snapper, went to Buffalo. He was the long snapper on punts and placements up there. I'm still not really sure why he left, but he did. Christian Bayer started for Georgia State at quarterback. Went 19 of 34 for 210 and a touchdown. Not a lot there, although he didn't turn the ball over. But that's about it. So to your point, not a lot coming out of these guys. DeAndre Jules played 17 snaps for South Carolina. On defense, 12 more on special teams. He had 5 tackles and a fumble recovery and blocked an extra point for South Carolina. So that was pretty good performance for him. And I think when we look back at it, he's one of the guys that you probably missed the most. I mean, you'd probably put him top 2 or 3 among defensive players who transferred out that Pitt misses the most. DeAndre Jules. I think Sam Okunlola, just because I think he's going to be really good, even though he didn't do a whole lot. He only played 22 snaps in the opener for Colorado. Deion Hayes played 47, had 5 tackles and a tackle for loss. He had also had an offside penalty. So, that kind of balanced out his tackle. His tackle for loss was for 3 yards. His offside penalty cost Colorado 5 yards. So, disadvantage Hayes. But those are probably the guys that they're going to miss the most, particularly when you look at the depth and what Pitt has this year. But on the whole, I think if you compare the transfer departures and the transfer additions, so far after week 1 of the college football season, Pitt is coming out ahead. Pitt has a net positive on its wins, losses from the transfer portal. Now, to your question about whether Pitt's defense will be better just on its own merit, it's really going to come down to the defensive line. I mean, the biggest, I think the linebackers will be as good, if not better. I think the DBs will be fine, if not better. It's really about the defensive line, and that was a weakness last year. It was a vulnerability that was exposed last year, and I think the jury's still out on whether or not it will be a strength of this year's defense. This game against Cincinnati, against a veteran offensive line and a team that likes to run the ball, and really passed it really well on Saturday against Towson. I mean, this is going to be a real challenge for Pitt's defensive line. They can't just blitz all the time. According to Pro Football Focus, Devin Cargman, the Kent State quarterback, was blitzed on almost 60% of his dropbacks. I don't know if Pitt can afford to blitz as much, given what they're going to need their linebackers to do. At some point, you've got to get a push with your front four, and they didn't get a ton of that in the Kent State game. So this is going to be, this week is a real challenge for Pitt's defensive line, and that's the unit that ultimately is going to probably be the determining factor in whether this defense is better this year than they were a year ago. And, I don't know yet. I think the jury is still very much out, awaiting a verdict. Mikey Bebop says, we've talked a lot about the defensive ends this summer and throughout camp, how they're unknown and there's a ton of question marks. Knowing this, it feels like the staff missed the mark in terms of recruiting that position this cycle. We have one guy committed, and he's going to be a defensive tackle when he gets here. To top it off, they only had 2 defensive ends even take official visits. What gives? I don't know. I don't know. I think that those are very valid questions. They're questions we asked this summer. In the midst of the June recruiting push and all the excitement there was sort of this lingering question of like, where's the defensive lineman? Where's the defensive ends? I don't really get, how they seem to have under-recruited that position in this class. And it's not like they've overlooked. I mean, they took a decent-sized defensive line class last year with Sincere Edwards and Francis Brew and Jasir Whittington. Is there one more defensive end? I think that was it. So it wasn't even that big of a class. I don't get it. If there's one gripe that I have with this staff's recruiting so far, I mean, we'll see how they are with player evaluation and all that kind of thing. But if there's one gripe that I have with this staff's recruiting, this largely new coaching staff's approach to recruiting, it's just volume. They just haven't done much in the way of numbers, of shooting their shots, casting the wide net. They haven't really done it. You look at the official visits overall. I think they brought in fewer guys for official visits in June this year than they brought in previous years. Certainly that's the case along the defensive line, but I think the overall numbers are down from where they were the last couple years when they brought in a ton of guys on official visits, and you're not going to get all of them. It hurts that, Pat Narduzzi used to be so proud of their sort of win rate on official visits, the percentage of guys that they would end up signing, and it cuts down on that percentage when you bring in so many guys. But it also, you have to cast a wide net when you're filling so much of your recruiting class in June. You need to have a lot of guys coming in, and they just didn't have that this year. You saw it in the prospect camps too. In June, the numbers were down, and I kept trying to figure out why. Is it because they went 3-9 last year? Is it, Kids are less interested in taking visits, and there's some elements of that. But maybe the biggest part is that they just didn't invite that many guys. They just didn't bring in, and so I like it when those camps are smaller, because when there were like 450 kids, it was impossible to even figure out who was good. So I like it when the numbers are down to, 150 or 200. But you still, I think, for a lot of reasons, you need to bring in a lot of guys to those prospect camps, and they just didn't do it. And so, I don't know if there's a period of adjustment, building new relationships, whatever it may be for this coaching staff, but I think they need to do a better job in the future of addressing the numbers, of just how wide a net you are casting. There's another question kind of along those lines, and this is from this week's mailbag questions. Berg B says, in this era of college football, does Pat Narduzzi need to rethink the strategy/preference of not prioritizing recruiting visits during the season? I know they have a few game day visitors, but I'm referring to more full-scale visits. It's obviously difficult to manage, and you may not get quite the amount of face time, but in this era, you just can't assume you have your class locked up, especially guys who have strong senior seasons. And we see other schools hosting large number of kids, obviously often high priority ones. It would seem to me Pitt should be doing the same, even if just as an insurance policy against decommitments. On the other hand, there's always the portal if you lose commits unexpectedly. So the thing Pat Narduzzi has generally shied away from, and Dave Wanstead did, and Todd Graham did, and Paul Chryst did, is the official visits during the season. And I think a lot of schools shy away from in-season official visits for reasons we've talked about and that you referenced, Bergby. The official visit should be 2 days of Pitt love, 2 days of love from the coaches, and 2 days of love from the players, of 2 days of immersing yourself in the experience of being a student athlete at the University of Pittsburgh. And that's harder to do on a game day weekend. Yes, you're going to get to experience part of what it's like to be a student athlete on a game day weekend. But when you really break it down, like these kids, the official visitors come in on Friday. The team is staying in the hotel. The players are all locked down in the hotel. They're not going to be able to show you around Oakland and hang out with you on Friday night. So you're kind of left to your own devices and the recruiting staff. Saturday, a lot of that time is just spent doing game day things. On a June official visit or an off-season official visit, Friday you get in, you have dinner with the coaches and the players, you go hang out with the players all night, you see what life as a student is like. Saturday you have meetings with life skills and academic advisors and break down film with the coaches, and you do all these things, culminating with a great dinner on Saturday night, more time hanging out with the players after that, and Sunday you wrap it up with a visit with Pat Narduzzi. A whole big chunk of that stuff right in the middle is cut out when there's a game. And you can still do a lot of cool things with a game day experience. You can still do a lot of cool things with, showing them around. And there are some of those meetings you can still have, life skills and academics and things like that. But on the whole, you're cutting out a big chunk of it. And so the coaches really feel like they can't give the recruit the full experience on these game day, in-season official visits. To your question, though, should they be doing more of it, given just kind of how things work. And then especially when you take into consideration what we just talked about, where the numbers were down, where you didn't bring as many guys in for official visits in June, should you try to make that up? I think, on one hand, I think there's a few things. Like, one, you should always try and get as many guys to your games as possible. No matter what you want to say about the game day atmosphere, no matter what you want to say about the results, it's good to get them here, beer on the team, watch the team play, see you in the locker room, all that kind of stuff. So you should do that. Number two, I think you should emphasize those off weekends. And they've got a couple here coming up. You know what I mean? They have one at the end of September. They have Saturdays off surrounding the Syracuse game, the Thursday night game. So you've got, I think, 3 weekends where you don't have a game, where you have an opportunity to bring guys in for official visits. You have targets that are still hanging out there. Then, yeah, you should try to bring them in on those weekends. I agree about that. And then if there are guys you really want and you need to get them on campus, bring them in on game days. I think you do have to be more open to it because, like you said, you can't just assume you have your class locked up in June because history has shown that you don't. History has shown that you're going to lose some of those guys. And so you need to find ways to protect yourself. And then you add in a new signing day that I believe is going to be like the week after the season ends. And now you really don't even have those weekends in December to bring in the late official visits. So, more is going to happen in season. More visits are going to happen in season to bring new guys into the class, to protect against losing some guys from the class, and just generally you're going to have to keep recruiting and recruit more during the season than you do than you have in the past. So yeah, I agree. I don't know if a wholesale policy change needs to happen. A wholesale policy change needs to happen, but I think, particularly those off weekends, you got to capitalize on those more. The Insider asks a question, and Jay Lazinger asks something similar. The Insider says, did Pitt's Week 1 performance change your record prediction? Jay Lazinger also says, does Eli Holstein's performance change your thoughts on our record for this year? I now think 8 regular season wins is possible. Well, my prediction was 8 wins. Whether it was a 7-5 regular season and a bowl win or an 8-4 regular season and a bowl loss. I had this team going 8-5, and I don't think anything has really changed for me for a number of reasons. I think I predicted 8-5 because I was expecting an improvement in the offensive play. I thought the offense would be better than it was last year. I thought a moderately improved offense would have won at least 6 games, if not 7 or 8 last year. And when you take into consideration a lighter schedule this year and that, expected improvement from the offense, I thought 8 wins was very much in reach. What I saw on Saturday was encouraging. Absolutely. I thought it was really exciting and encouraging to see how the offense operated, to see how they got guys open, to see how these guys made plays, seeing Raphael Williams out there and Desmond Reed out there. Obviously, Eli Holstein. The evolution of Kenny Johnson is very exciting for the future of this offense. The involvement of Gavin Bartholomew is very exciting for this. There's a lot to like. I have some questions about the defense, particularly along the front. And that's going to linger out there no matter what. But on the whole, I thought there was a lot to like about that game. I'm also, like most people, reserving judgment. You know what I mean? Because it was Kent State. It was the season opener. Let's see when there's tape out there on this offense, when teams have seen a little bit of what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it. And we've talked this week a lot about how you can use that to your advantage, that if teams are expecting you to throw some of this shorter stuff, Eli Holstein, I think average depth of target on his passes was 8 yards or so, not exactly stretching the field or attacking downfield outside of a few instances. You can use that to your advantage, that teams have seen it, that teams are expecting it. You can use that to your advantage, and it'll be interesting to see how they do. But for now, I'm holding steady on my prediction. For now, I'm holding steady at 8-5. I think even what we saw on Saturday sort of feels like it could be an 8-5 team. If you have a few instances where some of those near misses on interceptions by Eli Holstein, I'm not talking about Pitt's defense, but about the ones that Eli Holstein threw that were near misses on interceptions. Better teams probably catch those. Better teams probably convert those into turnovers. And maybe better teams convert, capitalize on a few of the missed opportunities for Pitt's defense, a few of the missed opportunities for Kent State's offense, situations where Pitt's defense maybe gave up, almost gave up a big play. Maybe future opponents, better opponents, don't make some of the same mistakes that Kent State's offense did. So, I'm holding steady at 8-5. I think it's still a perfectly reasonable prediction for this season, for this team. I think it's certainly an improvement over 3-9, and I think it will be a pretty good season if they go 8-5. So, to answer both of your questions, no, my predictions haven't really changed. I'm still kind of right in that same area. Let's get at least one more in here. For Mark Marty says, have you noticed a difference in the relationship between the team and staff, or how the staff interacts with the media with all the new coaches? Not really. I think each coach has his own individual personality. We talked to Jacob Bernowski this week. He's an energetic, excitable guy. He's a pretty good interview. I think Cade Bell, we talked to him last week. He was pretty forthcoming and interesting to talk to. I think Tim Dowse is a good interview. I don't know. I think, Pat Narduzzi sets the media policy. All right. If we're just gonna talk about interaction with the media, Pat Narduzzi sets the media policy. This week we talked, and most week we talked to 2 coaches and 4 players. We got all those guys on Tuesday, so we had no need to. There was nothing to do on Wednesday. We ended up getting the day off, so to speak, from interviews that day. But Pat Narduzzi sets that media policy. He decides who we're going to talk to, when we're going to talk to them, and largely sets the tone for how his staff interacts with the media, which is to say it's Fort Knox in the South Side. It's fine. It's how you want it to be. So not much has changed there. Again, each guy has his own individual personality. I think they seem like nice guys to talk to, I've enjoyed our interviews with them so far. We'll see how it goes going forward. Let's see, get one or two more up here. Atlanta Yinzer wants to know, with Rodney Hammond out for the year and the week 1 performance by Desmond Reed, is Reed now easily the player we couldn't afford to lose the most this season? I don't know about easily, but he's up there. And he's up there higher on the list than I would have put him even after we knew Rodney Hammond was out and before we saw what Reed could actually do. I mean, look, I said it a lot over the summer. I was coming around on the idea of Desmond Reed being really good. I was getting bullish on that. But I still needed to see it. I still needed to see how that explosiveness would translate. And boy, howdy, did it ever translate. So, yeah, he's getting high on that list, particularly when you take Rodney Hammond out of the mix. I think Derek Davis is a nice player, but I mean, Joel Goff is out for a while. You're running short on running backs. So your depth is a little bit shrunk there without Rodney Hammond, with Goff on the sidelines for a bit. And then you throw in how good Reed seems to be, how far above, he was. I mean, I think he's getting up that he's working his way up the list. Is he the number one guy that is unavoidable, or his loss has to be avoided at all costs? I'm not sure about that. I don't know who that one guy would be. I'm not sure there is one guy. But there's a small group of guys. There's a select group of guys, and he is certainly in that group. So, which is all the more reason they should not use him on punt return. But that's just me. Seems like a no-brainer. You protect him and save him for offense, but that's just me. All right, great questions this week. We're going to wrap it up there. We had a couple left over, but we'll get to those next week. And then in addition to all the new questions that we get next week. So, always fun to do these mailbags. Thanks so much for everybody who submitted questions this week. Thanks everybody who watched the video today. Make sure you like this video and subscribe. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com so you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. And then, of course, go over to the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com to get all your Pitt sports news and conversation on the message boards. Don't forget, we'll have our game thread going during the Cincinnati game on Saturday. We'll have our Guess the First Touchdown contest going on. All kinds of things on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. If you're a Pitt fan, you want to be a part of it. So go check it out, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Thanks so much for watching the videos this week. Have a great Friday. We will catch up with you on the post-game show tomorrow night after Pitt Cincinnati right here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com.